Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and selamat pagi. On behalf of the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, I would like to thank the organizer of this conference, PDC Telco and the State Government of Penang for inviting us. On behalf of Datuk Muhammad Ali Hanafiah, he sends his regards and his apologies for not coming here today because he's away performing his Hajj. He will be back in December. Okay, my name is Muhammad Razali. I work with the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, and I am. Including broadcasting, telecommunications, as well as internet infrastructures. We also regulate areas of technical requirements, consumer protection, including universal service provision, competition, as well as content. So we are the all-in-one regulator for the industry, and we are also one of the technical agencies in the one-stop center under the local authorities. So we are also involved with some of you. We communicate with a lot of you in a lot of matters as well. Okay. Just a little brief background on what the strategy is for the national broadband implementation that we formulated back in 2007. Basically, this strategy looks at the supply and demand for broadband infrastructure as well as services and applications. The broadband for general population basically looks at how we can provide broadband access to those population in general, including those in major towns, smaller towns, as well as in the rural areas. Secondly, the high-speed broadband is a project that we undertake with Telecom Malaysia, whereby the government invests about 2.4 billion to wire up about 1.3 million houses or premises around the country. And we also undertake some awareness and programs, as well as initiatives to increase the attractiveness of broadband infrastructures and services. Additionally, we also develop some policies as well as initiatives on how we want to make broadband affordable to the users. Okay, just a bit about the high-speed broadband project that we undertook from 2008 to towards the end of the year 2012. Basically, it's 11.3 billion investment, co-investment between Telecom Malaysia and the Malaysian government for a 10-year period, whereby we expect to install about 1.33 million ports around Malaysia. This is based on an open access arrangement whereby other service providers can have access to the fiber infrastructure. As at 2012, the project has invested about 5.6 billion around the country, and we have about 1.324 million ports installed at almost 99.9% of the proposed number of ports to be installed. There are about 400,000 plus subscribers, up from 255,000 as communicated by Dr. Bernard just now last year. So we see the doubling of subscribers within the year, and we expect to see more with the participation of other service providers under our HSBA, high-speed broadband access arrangements, whereby Packet One, Redtone, Celcom, as well as Maxis have entered into agreement to provide high-speed broadband using Telecom Malaysia's infrastructure. We also expect other providers who wants to have their backhaul or transmission to be transported on the HSBB network, about 17 of them. So we expect to see a lot more operator service providers to come on board and use the infrastructure, share the infrastructure, so that it is not going to be a closed access arrangement. It's going to be an open access arrangement that can be provided with the use of fiber. Okay. All right, beyond high-speed broadband, what we're looking at, how we want to make Malaysia a competitive nation. We have seen cities, towns, hamlets being turned into a very competitive economies actually, whereby they use the high-speed broadband infrastructure, the fiber infrastructure, to position themselves as the frontier of technology. So what we're looking at, how we want to use the high-speed broadband to facilitate and to transport the development of applications, content, as well as services within the country. We have the GTP and ETP. We also have several initiatives like Digital Malaysia and how it can be used to promote the use of fiber and high-speed broadband infrastructure. Additionally, we also look at the efficient use of spectrum by introduction of LTE and reuse of some of the broadcast infrastructure, as well as the introduction of next generation network services and transport, IPv6 and others. Additionally, we also look at how we want to improve the quality of service as well as the quality of experience of the users. Okay, the title of this topic is supposed to be broadband infrastructure, regulations and bylaws, but I think I'll just go straight to the regulatory requirements, which talks about what our challenges are, what our requirements are, and what do we expect to see in the near future in developing the requirements for an efficient development of communications infrastructure in Malaysia. There are three major areas: roles and responsibilities of the major stakeholders, competency and standards. I think Dr. Bernali would certainly agree on what we have on our slide later, and some of the procedures on approvals and submissions for the development of broadband infrastructure in the greenfield areas mostly. Okay. What we're looking at four major stakeholders. There are the developers, the network licensees, the MCMC as regulator, as well as the local authorities or the local planning authorities, who would be the major player in this environment. In the developers' role as in this initiative, basically the developers are involved in planning and designing for development. The developers will be involved in getting the values out of the land use that they see from their investments. Basically, the developers are also bound by the Housing Development Act 1966, which mandates them to have telephone trunking and cabling in the development that they have for housing developments, as well as the Amendment of Uniform Building Bylaws 1994, which requires the developers to plan as well as build the ducting required for the infrastructure, communication infrastructure going into their development. For the network licensees, basically they are also involved in the planning and designing capacity and demand for the developments. Basically, the network licensees might not know where these developments are until they are completed. And there's a lot of areas of concerns whereby these developments sometimes may not take into consideration of the communication infrastructure. And this would be a challenge to the network licensees on how they want to provide for such capacity. Additionally, they also build the rollout, the backhaul as well as last mile infrastructure for the brownfield. I think Telecom Malaysia, Time, Fiber at Home also are also involved in this development, as well as obtaining the right software to build the infrastructure from the local authorities. Thirdly, the MCMC as the regulator is empowered to regulate standards, certification and competency requirements for the planning, designing, procuring the equipments as well as installation of the infrastructure, including the fiber equipments. So there are a lot of areas of developments that we can see from the participation of the industry players in this. We are also a technical agency under the OSA PBT, so a lot of applications, development proposals from the developers and others come through to the OSC and rerouted to MCMC for comments. So we will see whether or not that the developments have taken into considerations the specific technical requirements for the cabling, the fiber, the location of the manholes, the location of the cabinets and others. So those are the things that we may take into consideration when we process the applications as the technical agency. We also monitor and enforce on the areas that we are empowered with. We enforce, we monitor the equipment to be brought in. We also see on how these installations are made, and we also make recommendations on how these installations can be improved. On the local authorities, basically the process and approves development in the greenfield areas. So as their role in approving developments, they are guided by our advice also, and we collaborate all the time with the local authorities in improving the processes as well. Okay, like I said earlier, the developer is required by law to provide the telephone trunking and cabling. With the advent of fiber, you may not want to consider copper anymore. You may want to consider fiber. So there will be a value proposition to your buyers, to your stakeholders, the shareholders, on how you want to improve the value of the development. So basically, as an enabler to a broadband environment, basically I think the developers have a significant role in recommending and proposing for the fiber installations. It may not be it may not cost any more than what the copper is, and it may be a little more efficient for you to have the fiber installed in your development rather than having the copper installations. So from the slides of Dr. Bernard Lee just now, the DSL subscription in Japan have declined. DSL uses copper technology. So with copper, you would require a less bandwidth, and people might not want that kind of installations anymore, and they might ask you whether or not that you have fiber in your development. Okay. Secondly, on competency and standards, I think we are on the same page with the FTTH Council, whereby we see the requirement for the certification of equipment, competency in the design and installation of infrastructure, as well as standard for designing and installation of this infrastructure. And our role in this basically is supported by the requirements under the Communications and Multimedia Act, as well as the subsidiary legislation. Part 3 of Technical Standards Regulations requires the equipment to be certified, be it a network equipment or a CPE. It has to be certified either by SIRIM, or it has to follow the international standards for it to be brought into Malaysia. So a lot of this have to be endorsed by SIRIM, or the type approval has to be issued by SIRIM for you to import this equipment into Malaysia. Additionally, the network equipments like the DWDM and other OLTs also have to be certified or type approved by SIRIM CAS in Malaysia. Additionally, I think the most important factor is on the competency. At this moment, Telecom Malaysia is, Multimedia College, is the only institution that is being certified by under Section 186 of Communications and Multimedia Act to be the certifying agency for competency in terms of installation, design, as well as maintenance of the network. What is relevant here is about the cabling provider, whereby the designer as well as the installer for the cables have to be certified by Multimedia College. Not necessarily the cables. I think the developers would have to ensure that the installers within their premises for the development going towards the houses from the bottom up would also have to be certified. We are looking at other agencies, other institutions also to undertake this certifying program so that we can have more people being trained to install this fiber infrastructure. It is different competency than the normal copper requirements. Basically, I think you would have the precision equipments for the splicing and others. So this would definitely need participation from you as well to ensure that your designers as well as the installers for the cabling to be certified by the relevant institution, in this case Multimedia College. Under the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998, basically we can designate in a body to develop the standards for the industry. Basically, it is a voluntary body which come together to develop the specific standards as required and to be used by the industry. It can also be mandated by the Commission in order for the standards to interwork with each other. The role of the Malaysian Technical Standards Forum is basically to develop the technical code to be used by the operators as well as developers actually. So when the developers submit these documents, they would have to make sure that their designs and installation, the network requirements, conforms with the requirements under technical standards and industry requirements, the TSAR, for fixed network infrastructure as well as fiber optics installation. So when we receive the submissions from the developers, we will see whether or not these are met. Thirdly, on approvals and submissions. Just to share you, I think there are a lot of procedures out there, but this is the ones that was identified by Kementerian Wilayah Persekutuan dan Kesejahteraan Bandar, the Federal Territories Ministry and the Urban Wellbeing Ministry. Basically, they wanted to improve the submission procedures for communication for specific developments requirements. When they did the survey, basically they found like a lot of steps, procedures that have to be met before development can be approved. A lot of it are internal departments within the PBT, where with the road excavation, SPA, MASMA, that kind of thing. But there are also other requirements for outside agencies, like if you were to see there, NFE plan verification, which has to be endorsed by MCMC first before it goes to OSC, and it goes to the specific departments within PBT. You have to get the bomba, in the water, inspection, approval before the DCCC can be certified by the relevant consultants. 16 in 2012 out of 150 nations plus. So we ranked quite low in this area. The then KSN treated it as a priority for us, all the agencies involved, as well as the local authorities within the KWPKM, to look at how we can improve these procedures. Just to share with you, as at this year, I think the report was out last month, we have improved 20 points just by improving the procedures for specific developments. So this is a new procedure. It has simplified. It is simplified. It is online, and it is based on the transparency of the procedures itself. What it requires is just for the local authorities to see how they can improve their own internal processes, as well as the agencies to see whether or not that the requirements are necessary for the development of such nature. So what are other items in the doing business report is the cost of starting business, getting credit, resolving insolvency, paying taxes. So this basically we have improved by leaps and bounds. So there's a lot of challenges within the local authorities as well as within the agencies themselves to see on how this can be improved. We would like to state that our network licensees are licensed nationally, so they can provide these services nationwide. It might cost money for the network operators to comply with different procedures, different forms, different requirements. There are a lot of local authorities out there, about 100 plus. So it may cost money, it may cost time for them to adapt to the different requirements of the local authorities, and it may drag the national competitiveness in the long run as well. So we need to be able to look at how we can improve these requirements locally as well as at the national agencies level. I think the Kementerian Perumahan dan Kerajaan Tempatan, the local housing and local government ministries is looking at how this can improve at other local authorities as well, so that the overall ranking for Malaysia can be improved. Okay, I think I'm going towards the end of the slides presentation. From the network operators, from the MCMC points of view, there's also a lot of awareness among the network operators also to understand the requirements of the Communications and Multimedia Act. The Communications and Multimedia Act 1999 provides specific roles and responsibilities for the network facilities providers, the NFPs, under Chapter 1, Part 10, whereby you have to comply with the specific requirements of the law. You have to issue the relevant notices to the landowners, you have to issue the relevant notices to the public authorities, as well as you have to grant access to other network facilities provider when you are given right of way. So these have to be understood by the network operators that the environment for the communications and multimedia industry basically is being flattened by the CMA. So a lot of these things previously done by, I think, historically, I think a lot of our discussions with the the network operators is that we have been doing this for 20 years, but that not maybe the right procedure for you to follow. It's not according to the law. So there's a lot of procedure, a lot of awareness also that we have to undertake to make sure that the network operators comply with this requirement. Why we are promoting the next generation broadband? Basically, I think there's a requirement under the Rancangan Fizikal Negara Kedua, the National Physical Plan, the second National Physical Plan, for the conurbation as well as other areas to be upgraded as cyber cities. So this has to be translated into the RSN, the State Structural Plan, as well as into the local plan. The Town and Country Planning Act 1974 basically states that the local authorities, the local planning authorities, have to take into consideration of the communication infrastructure within the local plan itself. So there are a lot of translation needs to be done for the Rancangan Fizikal Negara as well as from the National Urbanization Policy, which states that you have to be able to provide quality urban facility, information, ICT infrastructure and utilities within the urban areas. As Malaysia going beyond 60% urbanization I think a lot of us know that Malaysia is beyond 60% of Malaysians live in urban areas. So there's a lot of requirement for quality and basic utilities such as communications infrastructure, and these have to be provided beforehand. We have received a lot of pleas and calls from developers saying that please help us. We have completed our development, but we do not have the communications infrastructure. So this actually is the responsibility of the developers themselves, actually. So we can come in, but it will be an ad hoc requirement whereby it adds cost, it adds time, and it depreciates the value of your development to the users, actually. So there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of visioning that needs to be done by developers as well as local planning authorities in how we can plan for the communications infrastructure for the specific areas that we are looking at. The requirement for the communications infrastructure basically is very simple. You have to provide it beforehand. Now that the UBBL is been amended, it is part of the basic utilities that you have to provide before your consultants can sign the CCC form. The G20 now is not relevant, is getting more relevant to you. Previously, you can have an option of tidak terpakai. Now the G20 form is terpakai to you, and you have to make sure that your consultants certify as such. So the challenge now is for the developers to, for us to provide awareness to developers on the requirement for communications infrastructure. I think the event today is one of them. We appreciate PDC Telco and the state government as well as initiative by FTTH Council like Asia Pacific in getting the message out. We tried to do one in 2010, but it's quite a challenge for us to get the right developers to come in, because then they may not see the values of a broadband infrastructure in their development. Additionally, we also need see the requirement for competency among consultants and PSPs on their submissions. So your consultants, your PSPs need to be aware of these new requirements. It's not business as usual, it's a new way of doing things. Additionally, we also would like to see the developers engaging certified cabling designers and installers so that your installations are according to the standards, and we can be proud when Dr. Bernard Lee goes to New Zealand or wherever and say that we are installing according to the standards. On MCMC, we try to improve our service delivery as technical agency. It is a challenge because we only have 14 days to approve this submission. So there's a lot of requirements from us also. There are a lot of challenges for our regional officers to be able to provide the feedback and comments to the local authorities. Monitoring and enforcement as per our rules, as well as we also want to facilitate procedural requirements like what we do with the Federal Territories and Urban Wellbeing Ministry, as well as with the local government's department. On the part of network licenses, what we look for is the forward planning for the development's needs. In addition to what they have to do now, they also have to look at the beyond the 1 year normal financial year that they are looking at when they plan for their network at the moment. They have to look at what the nation needs and what the nation requires, and collaborate among the service providers on how this can be facilitated and developed to meet the demands. Additionally, future-proofing is very important. We see fiber as part of future-proofing the requirements for the communications and broadband infrastructure, and also the needs for them to comply with the specific requirements of CMA 1998. On the local authorities and local planning authorities, basically, we would like to see their support in communications infrastructure. It's not just that it has to be, you don't want to see it, but you want it to be there, but also it has to be supported as well. a lot of collaboration with the local authorities and local planning authorities. We see that a lot of local plans at the moment do not take into consideration of communications infrastructure. So there's a lot of engagement with the federal town planning department as well as the specific local authorities that are currently reviewing their local plans for them to engage MCMC, their consultants to engage with MCMC on how to provide for such infrastructure. And finally, we need to prepare our towns and city for the future. We may be at the forefront at the moment, but 2 years down the road, we may be behind countries such as, I don't know, Brunei, for example. They are very good. They are in the process of wiring up their country. So I think that's about it. You can contact me at the email address there. That's our office in Cyberjaya. People say it's in the boondocks, but it's not anymore. You can see the palm oil plants there, but there's a lot of development there. You may want to visit us to see what Cyberjaya can offer to you. I think that's about it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.